Hey guys, this is Dardamos with Dardamos Dominions, and I'm here with Mazarian. Is that correct?
I think it's Missourian, but honestly, it's a character from a book. I don't think I've ever heard it pronounced out loud, but that's how I've
So,
always.
like, are you from Missouri?
No. It's Missourian character from an old fantasy series from the '60s.
Oh, geez, what series was it?
It's the Dying Earth series from Jack Vance. It's actually one of the for people who like D&D anthropology. It was one of the inspirations for how magic worked in that game. So
Is it really?
yeah, and it was a story that got me hooked on fantasy a long time ago. So my little ode to Jack Vance and Missourian.
Now, I'm assuming that means that you're a little bit older, correct?
Yeah, well, right. It's in the username, right? 72. So yeah, I'm a little bit on the older side.
Oh man, you got me by 10 years. I'm impressed. I feel like I'm the old man around here because I get in with like the guys like Grippa, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm 20 years old," and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I'm old."
Yeah, I'm on the other end, so
What I like about Dominions, and I know it's a little bit off topic, but it's like it kind of attracts a lot of the older generation that we can't play these like Call of Duty games anymore.
exactly. It's an older, more mature crowd on Lucid's community, especially I find, which I appreciate. I'm new to the community, but I've really been enjoying it so far. And then yeah, the game itself kind of lends itself to that as well. So yeah, I agree.
So what nation are you going to be playing as?
So I'll be playing. Is it Arco? Is that how we say it?
That sounds good. It's just we'll go with Arco. I
Okay.
call it Arco Safali, but I'll be honest, it's everybody pronounces it differently.
Yeah.
There was one video that Lucid did with I think it was Saramatia, and in the comments somebody was like, "It's pronounced and then like this way, and you need to get it right." And I can't believe you messed it up. And it's just like, yeah, now Lucid, you're gonna have to do all those videos all over again and say it right this time. Like, I have no clue how to pronounce this.
Yeah.
So
The one that gets me is relay. I've heard about a dozen different pronunciations. I'm going with relay, but I don't think
that
anyone
sounds good to me too.
else know.
We'll do it. We'll say relay, and then anybody who says it wrong, we'll go to their YouTube channels and downvote
Exactly.
them. So what is Arco Safali, and what makes them unique? But let's actually step into this first. Who are your bread and butter researchers?
So the workhorse for this nation, I would say generally is the Mystic. So just kind of a 135 gold general utility, Astral 1 with some elemental pass with a research bonus. So that plus the cheap labs, and then possibly the philosophers. I think they were intended by the designers to kind of be the research-oriented nation early on. In practice, it comes down to boosters, but at least early on, they have that potential to rush a little bit more than maybe some other nations. So, but yeah, the workhorse researcher and the workhorse mage overall for this nation is going to be the Mystic.
Now, what's interesting is that it seems like a lot of nations, when you have your research monkeys, they double as last line of defense mages. If you go philosophers, I mean, I guess you could put some crappy items on them and just like, good luck. Hey, I got this in a random event.
Yeah.
Use this firebola.
I think the intention of the philosophers is, I don't see you getting those past year one. It's to bootstrap, that key Alt 3 construction 2 for your SC or something like that, I think.
Okay, well, I do really want to hit that later, but let's talk about your mainline battle mage. What's your mainline battle mage going to be?
It's the same thing. It's going to be the Mystic. You're going to commune with those guys. And the interesting thing about them is you're going to use the Mystics a little bit differently, I think, depending on the actual paths you get. They're a little bit hard to manage because the randoms are so random, but each one kind of has a little bit different purpose. Particularly the Earth 2s and the Fire 2s, I think, and also the Astral 2s.
What would you use them for? Let's go through each. Fire first.
Okay, so Fire. Well, the real key is the 2 versus 1. But Fire, is your Fire Elemental spam, or your flaming arrows, anything like that, right? But one of the things that I find with the Mystics is, depending on how you want to configure the communions, your 2-path randoms can either serve as a slave if you want to boost the fatigue, right? So that you can cast that low path requirement spell ad infinitum for length of battle. But if you need to kick off the big spell, then they're your communion master. So they give you that flexibility. Do I want, to spam the low path spell, then reduce the overall fatigue by putting them in the slave line? Or do I want to kick off that really big high path spell? Then that one extra path is often the difference between getting it off and not. So they serve that role. Also, in a pinch, you can use them to raid. And this is true for all the 2-pathers, or the fire ones especially. For Earth, for example, you're going to kick off Phoenix Fire and then Fire Elemental, and send 3 of those off into a province you need to counter raid. That can work. So they can work independently as well. So the 2-path ones are really your flexible ones.
What's amazing to these guys is that they've got the Astral, so you can do the what's the Power of the Spheres, and then if they got 2 Earth, then you could do the Earth spell as well, and all of a sudden you're an Earth 4. That's absurd.
Exactly. Yep. And and that's a mage that can act independently, or a group of 2 or 3. That's what I'm talking about, without using a communion, and that's just. They're very versatile mages, not just because of the 4 paths that they have, but the way that 2-path interaction works in all those different scenarios.
Now, theoretically, this guy could have Fire 2, Water 2, Earth 2, Astral 1, correct?
Or Astral 2 as well, yeah.
But it could random each of these. It can only have one of these, right? It can only have one of these, right?
Correct. You can only have one path maximum up to 2.
Okay, so it can, each one of these is an independent roll. It's not just one of these, correct?
Right.
Okay, that's really weird, because most mages, it says 50% and it gives you 3 different paths or 4 different paths.
Right.
Now, when you were testing, how often do you get a double?
Pretty frequently. But the degree of randomness is a little bit annoying, and not so much for the cost. I mean, because for every Water 1, Astral 1, which is probably the worst one, you're going to get the guy with all 4 paths and Earth 2, which is great. The problem is you want to organize them to work together, like I sort of described earlier. You want all your fires together to make a fire communion, and you want the 2s mixed with the 1s. You want your Earth 2s mixed with the Earth 1s. You want your Astral 2s mixed with whatever. And because you're recruiting them from various forts, it's a pain to get them all organized so that the ones you want together are together. And that's the other annoying thing, is that all communion participants, you can't segment by path in the same battle. So you want your fire communion and you want your Earth 1. It can be a little bit of a pain, but
Are you going to be going through the hassle of separating your fire masters and your fire slaves, or are you just going to be forget it and just put them all together?
Probably I'll want to, but in practice I probably won't. It'll just annoy me that I can't.
That's fair enough. Now, are there any other mages that you'll be utilizing at all?
Oh, the Oread, right? I mean, she's the workhorse is the Mystic, but the queen of the battlefield is the Oread, and especially slow to recruit. I'll be getting those every turn that I can.
With the Oread, are you going to be using this seduction ability at all?
Only situationally. If it happens to come up, I'm not going to make it a focus. The Oriad, to my mind, is a bit like the premium trim car. You probably want the mid trim or the low trim, right? But you're getting a lot of stuff that you don't really need. It's nice to have. Oriad is kind of like that. There's awe that she's got. You're probably not going to be, using her as a combatant, but it's nice if someone makes it to the back line and that holds them off. But, it's not something that you're going to really base a tactic around, probably. So the Oriad has a lot of characteristics like that. Ideally, I'd probably rather have something like, Banderlog's Rishi, where it's cheaper, but it's just got the good paths, and that's really all you care about.
Yeah, 400 gold is incredibly expensive.
Yes, it is. And again, you're getting stuff with that is nice to have, but not really necessary. But that's what you got.
Yeah, it's like only 100, or it's like 100 gold more, and you get a Dione.
Yeah, right.
Now, are you going to be like researching these as much as you possibly can, or is it going to be like one or two and then I'm done?
Researching.
Or sorry, are you going to be recruiting? I'm sorry, not researching. All right. Will these guys be on repeat recruit, or will they be on like pick and choose?
I will be recruiting as many as I can, but with the strategy that I'll be going for, I may be mixing in a few Wind Riders as well beyond the first year. We'll see about that, though.
Are you talking the Wind Lords?
Wind Lords, I mean, yes,
okay,
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So, now what about these Mage Engineers? It says they can only be recruited in the capital. Will you be making any of these?
With other builds, with some of the builds that I've tried with this nation, they have a place. In the build that I ultimately went with, they do not. So basically, if you've got a lot of scales, I like to get them in the first year as sort of my bootstrap first year researcher. With less scales, where the philosopher works instead. Again, just that sort of first year recruit mage. Because a lot of nations have that notion where you've got a mage where you're only recruiting them the first year, right? Or emphasizing them in your capital the first year only. Bannerlog's another example. You don't get rishis the first year. You get the yogis because they're the cheap ones. But after that, you never get them out of your capital again. And so the philosopher and the mage engineer are, to my mind, a year one recruit, depending on what your scales are.
What's interesting is you can get the astral here, and it's the only astral air access you have. You can actually plug him into. I mean, it seems like you'd want to go fishing for one of those guys.
And that's absolutely true. You may very well want to do that, but because you got such easy crystal matrix access,
that's true.
I don't know that it's really worth it.
That's true as well. Now, the Mason, will you be utilizing that at all?
Absolutely, and with this build especially.
What does that do for you? Does it bring you from what, like 2 CP to 3 CP? Is there a 3 CP option?
It's only castles because it's early age, right?
Okay.
I don't think so. I'm honestly forgetting offhand, but I think it's just 2.
Can you upgrade your own capital using this
guy? I should know that. I don't remember.
Don't worry, I don't know it either.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. I know that Hinam, for example, if you get the mercenary guy, you can get your capital to 3 CPs, and then you're pumping out like 3/4 of a bell card a turn, which is, I mean, it's huge. It's 50% more bell cards per game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In one of Ball's guides, he talks about Nabal. He's got a similar idea.
So let's move on to the units. What is your expansion unit?
So for the build I'm going with just plain old Wind Riders.
Now I see these guys a lot. These guys seem pretty popular. What makes them so good?
Well, I hesitate to say that they are so good. As a sacred, I'd say they're pretty good, not great. They are excellent expanders, though, right? Even without Bless. I mean, their stats for expansion are great. They can attack, rear. You don't even need a Bless on these guys. They're sort of, I keep mentioning Banderlog, which is, they're sort of similar. They're both astral nations, and they both have these great capital only sacreds that are great expansion, maybe into your first war, but you typically don't want to rely on them too much. You don't want to make them a centerpiece. These are kind of the Tiger Riders of this nation.
Now, the flying seems like it has a place even in later games, or later battles. I mean, you can go in back. Do people just counter it at that point, or what?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing with these guys is, they don't have, they're flying, but they're not glamored. They're not stealthy. They're size 4. The commander version doesn't have any magic paths, right? So all those things, the thing with them, same with Tiger Riders, they invite an overbless. But if you do that, you're kind of doing a poorer version of Ys, right? Or Vanheim, something that's really geared truly around the sacreds. And if you do that, you're kind of, it's tempting to do that, but you're kind of going against the grain of the nation. They're not good enough to warrant that much investment. They are a great supplement to everything else that's going on, but that really should not be the centerpiece. But it's tempting to do. So it's kind of a interesting thing with this nation when you're actually building a design for them.
So we'll go into Bless next. So you said that you're not going to be using these guys as your center line. When you move into the mid game and into the late game, who will be your center line?
Well, I say that typically, and here's the thing. I find, so Prune actually did a great overview of this nation, so I don't want to duplicate that effort too much, but I totally agree with what he came up with. And it's basically, you're doing scales, typically, a scales rainbow build, where you're giving these guys, a modest rainbow build, but they're just acting as an adjunct. They're raiding, they're hitting the back line if they're with your main force, but it's the troops backed up by communions and backed up by big battlefield buffs from your Oriads that are really the mid-late game centerpiece. Well, mid-game. Arco doesn't have a late game. That's one of the problems. But they're great in the mid game, and that is their mid game. So that is typically what you do, and that is what I looked at originally. I had a very typical, meta approved design based on the Grand Poobah or whatever the national rainbow is called. I forget. But I'm sort of moving into my specific build now. I'm looking at the players, and I'm looking at the specific nations in this game, and the fact that there's only 8 nations. And playing Arco in this mix is really, honestly, kind of a hard mode game. And in particular, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking the meta approved rainbow scales Arco, I just don't think is going to cut it in this game. So I don't know if you want to switch to talking about that or not.
Yeah, let's move into that. I was kind of interested. Actually, could you highlight one, like your mainline unit that you'll be spamming once you move away from Wind Riders?
Well, that's the thing. For my particular build, I'm not going to be moving away from Wind Riders. I'm going to be relying on them a lot longer than I normally would. I don't see me not moving them.
Okay, so you're gonna be. But who are the troops that are going to be your main line when your casters are casting? Who's going to be in front of your casters?
Yeah, I'm still kind of thinking about that. But with my build, if there's troops, it's going to probably just be the plain old Cardasses and Peltists, because I won't be able to afford anything else in great numbers. Situationally, I will also use the Chariots, which are great units in the right circumstance. But they're easy to counter, and they'll be hard for me to mass with my build.
That's true. Okay, so let's go into your build. What pretender did you take?
Well, here's the thing. So going back to the specifics of this game, the build I took, well, the pretender I took is the Colossus. I can't actually see your screen. I don't know if you're sharing or not.
Oh, is that? Hold on. Somehow I lost my screen. Oh, that's not nice. Okay. There you go. Can you see it? It should be in Dominions when you click on the interview.
Yes, got it. Okay. So I'm already forgetting his name, but the mobile immobile. What's his name? The Colossus.
Is it this one right here?
That's the guy. Bronze.
Oh
Colossus.
my goodness, he moves.
Yes, he does, and priced accordingly, as you can tell.
Oh my, that's incredibly expensive. You go from 170 to 350.
He is incredibly expensive, and the conventional wisdom is that SCs are still kind of not thought too highly of. I personally think they're underrated, but this guy in particular is not too highly thought of because he is so expensive. But
he's the most expensive with a flippin' reduction. That's hilarious.
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, when I first saw this guy, I didn't think I'd probably ever use him. I didn't give him much of a look. But in this particular game, here's what I'm thinking. We've got Maverny, who has cheap Astral. And I don't know Maverny real well, but the cheap Astral and then the spammable Boars or whatever it is. And I find that Astral versus Astral, it's the cheaper Astral that wins, right? Because Mind Hunt is the thing. Not Mind Hunt, Magic Duel. So that right away kind of makes fielding armies backed by Mystics kind of problematic. And likewise, I'm looking at Ubar. Mystics being Astral and being Research Fiends, the Astral in particular, they like magic scales. But in a game with Ubar, well, you're just giving Mystics to Ubar in that case, right? Because the corruption works in Magic, and it doesn't work so well in Drain. So right away, I see two nations that make the Mystics problematic. So I'm thinking, well, for this particular game, I think I'm going to have to do something, pull out something a little bit different. And I don't want to do something that is just a poor copy of another nation. So an Overblessed Windrider. So what I decided is, well, this Colossus is kind of a national advantage if I choose to take advantage of it. And if you look at his stats,
this is amazing.
He's got all the resistances, right? He's got the equivalent of Temper Flesh. He's got all the resistances. He's mindless. So he's a super golem. And normally when I see in a new player's build, they try to make a sacred that covers all the bases, and they're never going to transition to Magic, and that's just going to carry them through the game, right? That's kind of a noob trap. And so when I'm looking at this, my first reaction was, well, he's the pretended version of the same thing. He's got something that tries to cover all the bases, and that just never works. Magic is king. You got to transition that eventually. But for this particular game, I think is, I hope, the ticket. Because what normally works for Arcocephaly, I just don't think is going to work very well. So I'm hoping that, he can maybe rush Maverny. He can deal with the Dione SCs if I get rushed by them. He can deal with those, hopefully. This is all very, very much theory crafting. We'll see, but that's what I'm hoping. So that's why I went with him. I just did not see the usual Mystic conventional troop Oread lineup really working. Not early game and maybe not late game as well.
This guy has every single resist, literally every single resist.
Mm-hmm.
And then 18 magic resist to boot. So if any resist you get, it's just going to be,
It's just gravy, right?
Yeah, it's chocolate on top of whatever ice cream you like.
Yep.
Now, what I was looking at before, you've got a lot of point buff capabilities. I mean, Earth, you can make them literally fly. And I've noticed the Moss Body, which is kind of the point buff of, the magic point buff.
Yeah. And that's another thing with these Oreads. I typically just keep them as a army support with the big pass because they're so expensive. But with this particular build, I'm bypassing, scales for one, mystics for another, which the armies kind of want. And so in a sense, I'm kind of bypassing troops in a way. I'm really hoping to kind of do the elf thing where I'm not using, big masses of troops to fight. I'm using smaller elite maneuver units to raid and wear down an opponent. Use this guy on the defensive especially, but potentially even on the offensive. And just do the best I can with that. And in pushing that idea, I may actually end up using the Oreads more as thugs than I might normally do so, even with their price. I mean, I just don't have a lot of options. Another reason why I might be recruiting more Wind Riders than I might normally do so, I don't like them as thugs overly much, at least not A, because they compete with Oreads for recruitment, and B, again, they're size 4, they don't have magic paths, they just don't work that great. But again, if I'm not doing big balls of troops and mages, I got to do something. So
let's fill out the rest of this build real quick so I can see exactly what you're talking about. What are your magic paths?
All right, so fire 4, air 4, earth 4, astral 7.
Astral 7? Holy crap! Okay,
it's 0 or 7 on this guy, right? and I have to have magic weapons, right? You got Ubar and Therados. Got it, and just generally, right? It's very tough not to have magic weapons. And as for the other great thing about an SC like this, if he kicks it, he comes back, makes a cameo in the late game. These paths are also relevant, Astral 7 especially. One of the things that Arco struggles with is the late game. And Astral 7 means you've got the big access to the Astral 7 spells, and you don't need the ring, so you're getting the gem savings. So he's not just an early game, national defender, to borrow Lucid's term. He's also got late game relevance as well. Astral 7 is expensive, but he gives him that.
Now, what is your bless?
Okay, so the bless is a Wind Rider bless specifically for Ubar and the 2 elf nations. So it's fire and shock resist. So major fire, shock, and morale.
Wow. Okay, and then major, shock, minor?
Major, minor, shock. You got to have reconstruction on this guy, and then reinvigoration.
If he doesn't have this, then he just stays injured until he gets back to a lab, right?
I forgot about the lab. That's a good point. But in any case, that's what he's got.
Okay, and then so reconstruction.
The life-based ones don't work, right? He's inanimate, so.
I don't really know. I had another person that told me about it, and I was like, oh, you need to take reconstruction as the Agartha. And he's like, you just take it back to a lab, and he tested it, and the Agarthan things, they work, but I've never actually used statues.
I've never used inanimate sacred like this either. It's the first time I've used reconstruction, but I did actually hear that about Agartha as well. I did, so maybe it applies to him too. I'm not sure.
Okay. Either way, what are you doing with the Astral?
So first of all, the reinvig. If you notice on the Pretender, first of all, the Wind Riders like it because they got some encumbrance. And this guy is combat caster. You can't make him not cast spells. He knocks himself out real quick. So reinvig is kind of an issue. But yeah, so Astral is magic weapons, of course, and magic resistance. This guy can't get enough.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I saw about him is, magic resist 18 is good, but especially with the Astral Nations, you can always just throw. But wait, hold on, because he can't be mind.
Right?
He can be soul slayed though, right?
Sorry, you're right. The whole point is he's mindless. It's actually the Wind Riders that want the magic resistance.
Okay, so he can't be soul slayed. He can't be. That's amazing to me. Like that's what's scary about this guy.
Yeah. Brain fart on my part. Big reason why I got him is the mindless.
Can you magic duel a mindless?
You can, which is I think because I'm
kind of curious about that.
I'm now that you asked the question out loud, I'm not sure, but I based this Astral 7 in part on that. Astral 7 is great to have anyways. Like I said, it kind of gives you the late game option, and it obviates the need for rings.
I think it's great either way, and not only that, but you've got some major. I mean, like Astral. I want to say Astral Earth is a pretty good path to have as well. So it's not even if you can't get mind dueled. I still think it's a good build.
I'm pretty sure Magic Duel does not apply to mindless. I think it's just the Soul Slay and Paralyze and such, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, so, but in any event, I won it on the Wind Riders as well, so there's that.
Hey, you get solar weapons instead of the magic resist.
True.
Did you see the last? Did you see the Satis solar weapons build in the last game?
On the Monkey Dance?
Yes.
I must have. I've been watching it. It's been a while since I watched any of those, but I'm a little bit behind on that. But,
yeah, I don't think he ever uses it. It's so, because the sacreds are so rare, and even then, solar weapons, you kind of, you either have the damage already or you don't. So
yeah.
What are your scales?
Scales. So I might still tweak these, but it's I think it's 6 on the Dominion, -1 on yep, because I need recruitment points, -3 on the 3 heat, which is another reason why I took fire resist to help with fatigue and fighting in my own Dominion. 0 on the growth, 2 luck. And this really hurts on Arcocephaly, but drain 1. And the reason is, again, Ular. I don't want to be giving away my mages. And then the second thing is, what was the second reason?
While you're thinking of that, what's really interesting is I kind of have had to bring these interviews to where we only have so many people in at a time, because once you get like 3 or 4 people, you start getting like this is driving me nuts, dude, because I've got like, I'm looking at this and tweaking this and that and saying, oh my goodness this and oh my goodness that, but my goal is to get information out of you, because people don't want to know what, my Arcocephaly build is, because we're not going to see my Arcocephaly build.
Right.
But, drain 1, you've got your reasons for it. You said you're worried about Uvar.
Uvar's one. Honestly, I'm forgetting what the other reason was. There were 2 main reasons why I did it. But one thing that I'm not worried about is the research. We don't have on Arcocephaly a cheap base 7 research points that really wants Magic 3 to make it a super efficient researcher, right? I've already got tons of research, and I've got all the boosters. So it doesn't hurt the research, which is nice. But it does hurt the astral capability. That's what you really want the magic for. But I've also got communions, so I can mitigate the fatigue while I'm casting other things. So there's not as bad as it might seem at first.
What I see about this build is it's very defensive in its nature, is that you've got the ability to drop this guy on an invading army. This is not something that I would want to fight into. And as such, you've got the defensive weapons. What are you going to do to be offensive? What are you going to do to siege down? Especially sieging down forts seems like a big deal to me. What are you going to be using to siege down forts?
Sieging down forts is not a problem if I've already won the battle, because I've got the engineers.
I don't think we hit these, and this is a big deal, because like 25 siege defense for 40 gold and 1 research, you literally can get 50 siege bonus from a fort.
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm not going to buy troops. I'm going to buy castles instead, and I'm going to recruit mages like crazy, both of them, the priestesses and the mystics. Normally I'd go almost pure mystics, but for this build, it'll probably be more of a mix. So it's going to be all castles. They're going to be held up by these guys. I'll tear down opposing castles with these guys, plus a bunch of slingers. But I'm not fighting with troops overly much. And that's going to be tricky. And that's why I say I make the comparison with some of the more elite type nations, that have trouble building huge armies, the giants and the elves. I'm kind of doing the same thing here. I'm counting a lot on Wind Riders more than I normally would, I'm counting on the Oreads. I'm counting on this guy who I think actually can also be used potentially offensively as well, because he can magic phase in. And the reduction in the base hit points in enemy dominion is not as big of a deal because he can't regenerate. This is one thing I'm really worried about with this guy. He cannot regenerate. There's no way that I know of to make him regenerate. But the good thing about that is, the sort of silver lining, the lower base HP doesn't matter, because that only matters with regards to how much you regenerate once you go below it, right?
I'm kind of curious. Does he lose hit points when he goes into enemy dominion?
Well, the way the rule works is you bring the hit points with you that you're coming from, right? So if you start in a high dominion province and move into an enemy dominion province, your hit points start where they were where you're coming from. But then when you regenerate, they go back up to your new maximum.
Okay.
So if you teleport in, you get the full HP pool that you're bringing in from the previous province, and you're not regenerating. So there's no opportunity cost to not having to not being able to regenerate to the top, because you can't regenerate.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that gives me a little bit more flexibility to operate in enemy dominion than I might otherwise have with an SE, because you're really counting on regeneration to deal with that chip damage. But the lack of an ability to deal with chip damage at all is probably the thing I'm most concerned with this guy.
Okay, so I got a real quick question for you, because we're running a little long. I want 2 or 3 players in their nations that you're very worried about.
Maverny, because his astral cancels my astral. Ubar, because Ubar. And also because he counters the elemental pass on my mystics, right? Why are you bringing elemental path communions to something that's fire and shock resist? I'm worried about just about everyone. And that's why this build is so defensive and so unconventional. But those two.
Are you more worried about the nations, or are you worried about the players?
Both. I mean, I did not get one of the expert seats in this game. I got the Patreon seat, right? So I'm worried about all the players.
Are there any big names that you can throw out? Because I'm kind of I really like this, because the Dominions community is a community, and there's a little bit to be said about reputation. And I mean, I handpicked about 5 or 6 of these guys, like asking, like, can you join in? What are some of the names that you recognize?
I think at this point, I at least recognize all of them. Now, RCK is a new name for me. I only learned about him from your last, Monkey Dance series. But, I mean, he's scary, right? I mean, he did great in that.
Yeah, he did amazing.
Kirby, I know, and I've played with him actually in another game. I know he's good. I've actually even watched his YouTube channel a bit. Joe Brandon, I know from the interviews in Monkey Dance. That's how I know him. And he's obviously very good, just from the level of knowledge he brings. Xiaomin, is that how you say his name? Same thing. Sakane, I know, obviously. I mean, I watch his channel too. He's awesome, of course. Gazlov is another player I learned from Monkey Dance. He did awesome, right? I mean, yeah. So some of these players are new to me just from Monkey Dance, but everybody here is scary.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time and showing us your build. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm interested in seeing how this works. I'll be honest, this is unconventional, and I can see it working. But it's absolutely unconventional to have, to bring this very overpriced Colossus. But you seem to have a purpose for it that makes its price worth it. So thank you for showing this off. It was really interesting.
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say about it eventually.
Okay. I'll catch you guys in the next one.